Which tea should you choose, Japanese tea or Chinese tea? This is a common question as Japan and China are two of the most prominent regions for premium tea cultivation, but there are major differences between the two. In this video, we're going to compare the differences and similarities between Japanese tea and Chinese tea to see which one is better. Before we get started, it would really mean a lot to us if you could subscribe to our YouTube channel and stay tuned for future tea videos. We have hundreds of videos on all sorts of topics related to Japanese green tea. But for this episode, we're also going to talk about Chinese teas as well. Without further ado, let's get started. Which is more common, Japanese tea or Chinese tea? The first thing to keep in mind when making a decision between Japanese tea or Chinese tea is the quantity of tea produced. China is the largest producer of tea in the world, making over 2 million tons per year. Japan is tiny in comparison, producing only 90,000 tons of tea a year. 98% of the tea produced in Japan is consumed domestically, while only 2% is exported. This makes Japanese tea even more rare compared to Chinese tea, which is heavily exported around the world. You may experience a lot of low-quality Chinese teas, but this does not mean that high-quality teas are not produced in China. It only means that there's a huge volume of inexpensive teas being produced there as well. When it comes to Japanese tea, it really only makes sense to export the premium stuff to foreign markets. That's why you may find that there's seemingly a higher bar for Japanese tea. This is especially true for matcha, as you will mostly find the premium ceremonial grade matcha coming from Japan, and the lower grade matcha mostly coming from China. This high quality matcha requires a lot of extra labor and special talent in order to produce, and with centuries of specialization around matcha cultivation and production, the advantage goes to Japan. What are the advantages of Chinese teas? Because we mentioned Japan having an advantage when it comes to producing teas like matcha, let's also discuss an advantage of Chinese teas. While China does produce a huge volume of teas, they also produce some very high quality teas as well. As we will discuss in more detail later, the production of Japanese teas relies more on machinery and automation, and the production of Chinese teas is more hands-on. This more hands-on approach makes it possible to produce premium teas with incredible attention to detail. The tea producer is able to use visual cues to tell when the tea is exactly right, and therefore they are able to make unquantifiable calculations to improve the flavor. The next disparity when comparing Japanese tea or Chinese tea comes down to the type of tea being produced. While both China and Japan produce more green tea than anything else, Japan has a much higher concentration of green tea. 3/5 of the tea produced in China is green tea, meaning that 40% is black tea, oolong tea, white tea, yellow tea, or post-fermented tea. While this may seem pretty lopsided, it's actually quite balanced compared to Japan. Around 90% of the tea produced in Japan is green tea, while the remaining 10% is black tea, oolong, and post-fermented tea. Because almost all the tea produced in Japan is green tea, it makes sense to compare Japanese green tea and Chinese green tea together. Both of these teas are unoxidized, but the methods used to produce them can be very different. To be considered a green tea, the tea leaves have to be unoxidized. Once the leaves are picked, they will begin to oxidize naturally over time and eventually turn into a black tea. In order to stop this process, heat needs to be applied to the leaves in order to deactivate the enzymes that cause oxidation. In China, the leaves are heated in a hot pan or a wok in order to stop this oxidation process. When you heat the leaves together in a hot, dry pan like this, it imparts different flavors onto the leaves, and the tea tends to take on this warmer, nutty characteristic. In Japan, the producers will steam the tea leaves after the harvest. This locks in more of the vegetable notes of the tea, and as a result, steamed teas like Sencha will take on these notes of steamed edamame, sweet corn, baby spinach, and even seaweed. Some of these teas will take on a vibrant green color, like the Fukumushi Sencha, a tea steamed for an even longer time. For this reason, if you are deciding between Japanese tea or Chinese tea, it all comes down to which flavor profiles you prefer. There is a type of Japanese tea called Kamairacha, which shares these more nutty taste characteristics with Chinese teas. This is because the tea is pan-fired, in the same method used to make Chinese green teas. Choosing between Japanese tea or Chinese tea. Finally, given the differences in production, taste, and appearance of the two teas, which one should you choose? Japanese tea or Chinese tea? The most important variable comes down to taste, and this is something you will need to experience for yourself. If you're interested in getting an idea of the flavor of Japanese teas, we can certainly help you there. During the past few years, we've traveled all around Japan to meet with farmers and sampled hundreds of different types of Japanese green tea. We have ultimately decided on just a small handful of our favorites, and we share these with people all around the world. If you want to try all these teas at once, you can try one of our samplers. With these samplers, you can explore different types of sencha, matcha, gyokoro, hojicha, kamairacha, genmaicha, and more, all produced without the use of pesticides or chemicals. These teas are a great representation of Japanese green tea, and once you try them all, you are one step closer to deciding between Japanese tea or Chinese tea. Not that you can't enjoy both. Thank you all so much for taking the time to watch this YouTube video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions about Japanese tea or tea in general, please feel free to leave those in the comments below. Until then, we'll see you next time.